Hey friends, Sheila here. I am a holistic nutritionist and bicycle traveler. I believe in gentle nutrition, intuitive exercise, and just staying curious and figuring out what works for your unique needs. Today is part 1 of 2, digging into how to pick an energy bar for endurance activities. So things like running, hiking, cycling, and bike touring. In part 1 today, we're going to discuss the 3 key components to look for when selecting from a whole aisle of bars. And then in part 2 next week, I've actually selected 5 different common bars and we're gonna break them down in detail. So you can get a nutritionist perspective on these popular bars and how I go about my selection process. So hit subscribe and the little bell below to be notified when part 2 comes out next week. Before we begin, just a quick disclaimer that this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your doctor or healthcare provider on your unique needs. Okay, let's start with the basics. Why choose an energy bar in the first place? We burn through a lot of energy, a lot of nutrients during endurance activities, and replenishing those nutrients is key. Bars are simply an easy way to fuel on the go, but there are so many options out there with different nutrient profiles, different ingredients, and sorting through all of it can be kind of confusing. So I am here to demystify your bar selection and help you find a bar that will let you feel your best. Now, what makes up a great endurance bar? I think there are 3 key aspects to look at when selecting a bar for your next endurance activity. Number 1 is macronutrient ratio. The 3 key macronutrients are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Now I go into them in more detail in my video on nutrition for bike touring, which I will link above and below. So you can watch that video to get a better understanding of macronutrients as a whole. For today, what we'll be focusing on in terms of selecting a bar is carbohydrates, because they're our body's quickest source of fuel. Fats and proteins are incredibly important for our bodies, but exercise isn't necessarily the best time for a high volume of them. This is for 2 reasons. Number 1 is we can't use them as quickly for fuel as carbohydrates. And number 2 is that our bodies have to go through the process of digesting them. During exercise, our digestion isn't working as optimally because it slows down to divert that energy towards our muscles. Having a little bit of fat and protein in our bars can be helpful for future stores, but it isn't the best time for a high volume of them. So we want to look for a bar that's high in carbohydrates and on the lower side in terms of protein and fats. Studies show that consuming 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates during prolonged exercise delays fatigue and improves endurance. Of course, this will depend on your body and your activity level. Generally speaking, we have enough carbohydrates stored that we don't need to eat for exercise under an hour. But after an hour or so of an endurance activity, consuming carbohydrates is generally recommended. So step number 1 of selecting a bar is looking at how many carbohydrates we'll get versus how that compares to the fat and protein quantities. The second thing to consider when looking at a bar is the ingredients. When selecting a bar, I like to take a look at the ingredient list and see how many of the ingredients I recognize and want to be consuming on a regular basis. Now, I am very much somebody who believes that all foods can fit in our lives, and there is nothing wrong with consuming more processed foods when needed or enjoyed. But I do think it can be helpful to consider the ingredients in our bars, particularly because for endurance activities, we can end up eating a lot of bars. So choosing ones with more whole ingredients when possible can be a good idea. But if all you have access to or what you prefer is a bar with more processed ingredients, that's okay. Keeping yourself fed and nourished is most important, so you have to find what works for you. The third thing to consider is additional vitamins and minerals. Lots of vitamins and minerals can be found in bars, but here are a few to look out for. Number 1 is sodium. Now, sodium gets a bad rap, but sodium helps with dehydration and sodium depletion, both of which adversely affect athletic performance. The amount of sodium needed is going to vary greatly between individuals, depending on the amount you sweat and the concentration of sodium in that sweat. So supplementing with something like an electrolyte drink or salt pills may be needed. But a little sodium boost from our snack of choice can be helpful as well. A second thing to look for is other electrolytes like potassium, magnesium, and calcium. These are going to help keep those muscles firing. Number 3 is B vitamins, because we burn through a lot of them during exercise. And number 4 is antioxidants like vitamins A, C, and E to help repair the damage done during exercise. Now, unfortunately, we won't be able to see many of these vitamin and mineral details on our bars because they aren't mandatory on nutrition labels, but where we do see them, it will be helpful. So these are the 3 key items I look for when selecting an energy bar for my endurance activities. If you have any bars in your cupboard, have a look and see what you notice. Like I said, next week I'm going to be looking at these 5 popular bars in more detail, so stay tuned for that. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. It really supports my channel. If you want to be notified whenever I put out new videos, you can hit subscribe and the little bell below. And if you want to follow me for more regular tips and tricks and adventures, you can follow me on Instagram at Sheelagh.Daly. Thanks, have a good one.